Now, very quickly and superficially, I'm going to talk a little bit about self-regulation, about arousal levels, and about executive function. I'm moving very much into territory that I think of as Tim Hartshorne's territory. Tim is also involved in making modules for this project. And a lot of the things I know about these topics, I've learned from him. He's a close colleague and a friend. We've worked together a long time. He and a colleague have produced an interesting booklet about self-regulation in charge. And I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. But here's a quote from the booklet about self-regulation. Self-regulation may be defined as the capacity to manage one's own thoughts, actions, feelings, and physiological states in adaptive and flexible ways across a range of contexts. Self-regulation involves both the initiation and maintenance of behavioral change, in addition to inhibiting undesired behaviors or responding to situational demands. My next slide shows what's called the 9 levels of arousal. And if you look at it, at the very top, you've got the highest level of arousal, uncontrollable agitation. And at the bottom, you've got deep sleep, which is the lowest level of arousal. I think of this as a ladder, and it's a ladder we are all on. And even at the moment, as I'm talking, at the moment you're listening to me and watching this module, you are somewhere on that ladder. And I think for most of us, ideally, we'd be at the quiet awake or the active awake level. Because we're a long way through the module, you might be now at the drowsy level. Occasionally, you might drop down to active sleep. As time runs out for me, I tend to go up the ladder, and I'm now getting to the fussy awake level because I want to make sure I say everything while there's still time. The children we're thinking about don't know about this ladder. They probably don't feel where they are on the ladder, and they may well shoot up this ladder or drop down it very suddenly without any ability to control that, without being able to wake themselves up or calm themselves down. And this is one of the big problems with self-regulation in charge. We see it very, very commonly. These sudden moments when the child gets very, very agitated and upset, or gets suddenly very tuned out and exhausted, often resulting in sleep. And I think the task for us is to think about the individual child. Where are you on the ladder of arousal? Where do you need to be because of this situation and the place and the time that we're in? And how can you get there? And I've seen people work on this by using fewer steps on the ladder instead of 9, by individualizing the vocabulary and using rather more normal terms than high arousal or low arousal, by using words or picture symbols or photographs or whatever, maybe by revisiting situations where the child's shown poor self-regulation, or using social stories. And in my experience, children with charge are very receptive to social stories. They particularly like it if you share a story about a child who gets into trouble. They have a kind of almost malevolent delight in hearing about a kid who does something very bad and gets into trouble. And you might be able to explore, if they have the language level and the sophistication, the social awareness, exploring why that girl did that and why she got into trouble and what should her mum have done about it, and what did the mum do, and what was the girl like afterwards, and that kind of thing. You could use role play, and you could use that question, what do you like, what do you need, to try and get the child to see, to feel better when they were getting over-aroused, when they were heading into an upset or a meltdown. And for us, we have to work to be better at reading the child, at observing and interpreting. We have to get better at making connections, working out why the child might have had the meltdown, why they got over-aroused, why they suddenly got very tired and conked out of what we were doing. Helping the child to feel their body more effectively. I think a lot of the self-regulation issues come from that break between the brain and the body. And we want the children's brains to be feeling their bodies more effectively so that maybe they start to feel that they're getting tired or feel that they're getting stressed because of sensory information coming into their brains. Directing that individual's attention to indicators they're giving of stress or tiredness, reminding them of strategies they can use to calm down or to wake up, and matching and sharing experiences. And then I have a picture sent to me from England. This was originally a weather chart. And at the bottom, you've got like thunder and lightning. And at the top, you've got the sun shining. And at the side is a black arrow that you can slide up and down. And it's been amended from weather to be an indicator of the child's emotional state. And at the top, you've got happy. As you go down, it says calm, quiet, whiny, and then cross, which is a very English word, of course. Here, I think somebody would say angry in the United States. I rather like that in England they say cross. And the idea is that after an upset, the child, together with you, you can move the arrow so the child can show you where they were. Even better, when they're getting to that state, they can draw your attention to the fact that they're moving, that the arrow's moving down and they're moving into that trouble spot at the bottom. And the challenge all the time is how can we help the child to recognize and deal with excessive levels of over-arousal or under-arousal in socially acceptable ways? If self-regulation is difficult, can the child at the very least learn ways of asking for help? Can they get an idea of trouble spotting so they can indicate that they need help because there might be a problem coming? And here is the cover of the booklet. There were many, many authors involved, but it was Tim Hartshorne and his colleague Jude Nicholas who created this booklet. And then even more quickly, a slide about executive functioning. This is from an article which you have in your resources from an English, I think she's a psychologist, Amanda Kirby. It's a very simple article for parents, which is why I like it. And she talks about a typical executive functioning aspects. And if you look through them, they're all things that are often very difficult for children with charge: activation, focus, effort, emotional control, memory, and action. I won't go into the details there, but I would look at the article. And this is an area that hasn't been terribly well researched in charge syndrome and needs a lot more investigation because it can be a very big problem. And we see executive function disorder in really highly developed, academically able adults with charge, just as we see it in young children really at the start of their educational journey through life. So it is a big part of the syndrome. And then a few more points: social considerations. Children with charge often get very isolated. They often don't develop friendships with others. This seems to be a part of the syndrome, but it's also a reflection of the societies in which we live. And I think two particular approaches, a buddy system at school and circle of friends, both those approaches have been known to be very powerful. And certainly, as far as circle of friends is concerned, Tim Hartshorne and Nancy Hartshorne use this very, very extensively with their son, and they've produced a number of articles about Circle of Friends. So there could be some really rich pickings there if you wanted ideas on this aspect. My next slide gives you the link to the big intervener training program that's available here in the United States. It's available to anyone free of charge. It's called Open Hands, Open Access, and it is a little bit overwhelming. I think there are 28 different teaching modules, but it's a very, very helpful resource. It's about deaf blindness rather than specifically charge, but it has huge relevance. So that's the end of this session. I hope it's helpful to you. I've tried to put as much charge-specific information in as I can, but I've also tried to broaden and make more shallow my coverage to point you in the directions of things you might want to investigate, because this is such a huge topic. And perhaps the last thing I can say is getting the right educational program for these children also depends on a lot of good luck. You need all sorts of input and effort. Everyone has to be on the alert all the time to make sure things are working and still working, and that everything is still appropriate. But also there has to be good luck involved. So I'm finishing up with fingers crossed and wishing you the best. Thank you.